Okay. Hi, everyone. Deb Slater-Lee, as Jack said, State NRM Office. I've been doing this for a while now. Prior to that, though, I was actually the Monitoring and Evaluation Coordinator at South Coast NRM. So I do have a bit of a passion for monitoring and evaluation, as you may find out as we go along. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. I do have a presentation, but as Jackson said, I would encourage you, if you do have a question, sometimes it's great to actually be able to answer that question to give it context in the presentation. So yeah, please just put your little hand up on the how do we do that in this, in reactions? Yeah,
reactions, just raise hand.
Yeah, in your reactions bit, just raise your hand. It might be that I'm going to get to that further on in the presentation, but we'll just manage that as we go along. So sharing screen. Can everyone see that? It should be the front page of...
Yes, we lost a little bit of volume there, Deb, but I think you're coming back now.
Okay, great. Okay, so the first thing is we also want to acknowledge the Aboriginal people of the many traditional lands and language groups of Western Australia. I'm talking to you from Binjarab country, which is actually in Mandurah. Now,
Deb, if I can just suggest that you actually put it into slideshow rather than, yep.
Thank
there
you.
We go.
Thanks, Jo. Okay, the first thing to be that we need to talk about is that, and it might seem a strange place to start, but actually we do have outcomes. These align with the WA NRM framework. And I'm going to refer back to these as we go along. So just keep those in mind. So monitoring is where you plan how you will tell your project story. And reporting is where you actually tell that story. And they are codependent. It's a bit like writing a novel. You actually can't write a novel unless you have a plot and you have characters. It's a similar type of thing. You actually need to plan. You can't retrospectively report on something that you haven't measured. So, an example, and I just want to refer back to this example. So, a project will occur across 3 private farm properties. It'll protect rem and veg, and it'll revegetate parcels of land abutting that. You guys could read that. I don't need to read it out. The thing that we want to ask is which outcomes will this project contribute to, and what will you monitor it to evidence is, and how will you capture that evidence? So if we refer back to this, I would say the main thing that we're doing here is actually priority 4. We're conserving and recovering biodiversity. However, the other thing that was in there is that the other thing is that we were using volunteers from local community to assist with planting out 2 of the properties, which means that we can also pick up priority 5. And so these are actually really important. These outcomes are important to try and capture what is it that you're trying to do. I would encourage you to do a little summary like that. This is what we're planning to do, and these are the basic activities, and then refer back. So you're going to be tick-tacking a little bit in referring backwards and forwards. All right, so planning to monitor. So again, what outcomes will you be contributing to? Asking that question is really, really important as a first step to actually say, yep, these, so it's priority 1, it might be priority whatever. be very aware that whatever you decide you're going to contribute to, you're going to need to provide evidence towards that. So it's probably good to only choose one or two. There's not that many projects, to be honest with you, that are going to contribute to all of those, but there might be a few. Now, this is a really, really critical point. It's crucial that we don't overcook these things. When I say that monitoring should be commensurate with the value and effort of the project, it would be completely insane for us to expect a project that is quite simple. It's just going to do some re-veg or some weeding and expect this incredibly complex evaluation as part of that. That's actually not commensurative, especially if it's, you know, a low value project in terms of the monetary value. So each of those projects, each project will have its own unique monitoring plan. Sorry, I've just got a little feedback there. And the office will determine at assessment and contracting whether an appropriate level of monitoring has been proposed. We're actually pretty good at this. We can actually look at a project that's very simple, that's being delivered by volunteers, and go, okay, this is a minimal effort required. And we do have the lowest requirement, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it is actually really important that we don't overcook these things. The thing to remember, photos are easy to do and do provide reasonable evidence. And the other thing that's really important is you can request funding to achieve quality monitoring. So if you're asking for a reasonable amount, you actually don't have the internal capacity to do some monitoring that you'd quite like to do. For instance, if you aren't actually, your group doesn't have the capacity to do really good quality GIS mapping, you might actually ask for funds to do that, so that going forward you can provide greater evidence, which we will get to in a moment. That said, if there is a big project that's worth a lot of money, we would expect, again, a good quality monitoring to actually happen in that. And I'm going to flip this around a little bit, because I'm now going to actually start talking about the reporting part, which is going to show you the types of things that have been monitored. So I hope that's not too confusing. So reporting, now it's time to actually tell that story. You need to set the scene, describe your project and the site. The other thing to remember is when you apply for your project, when you put your application in, the measures that you put in your work plan are what you are expected to report against. So your ability to report correctly and supply appropriate evidence is noted. I need to emphasize that, and it can influence your future applications. So the better job you do of reporting, it will hold you in really good stead moving forward for future applications. And the other thing that I know we bang on about a lot, and probably driving yourselves and everyone else insane, but it's really important that you acknowledge your funding source as well. We do pay attention. Okay, mapping. Now I'm actually going to try to do something very fancy here. Oh, one of the sorry, I did actually miss. Can you guys see the project activities, measures and evidence guide?
No, not at the moment. We're just seeing your slide. So you can swap your sharing, just do a stop sharing and share the other thing that you want to.
Oh, great, thank you.
That's it. Beautiful.
See that now? Oh, thanks, Jax. Okay, so it's this this guide is actually, we've spent quite a bit of time actually preparing this, and there is a link to it in the guidelines, but we're happy to share that as well. So this gives you some examples, and I'm just going to fly through at the moment because I really don't want to spend too much time on it. But there's a lot of examples of how you would do good monitoring, especially around some of the information products, and how you actually how you do some of that pesky people stuff as well. How do you monitor against some of the softer activities? So I'm not going to go into too much detail now, but this is actually a really important resource, and really happy to share that more widely. As I said, there is a link in the guidelines, but we will.
We can provide that afterwards too, Deb, to everybody. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, the more readily accessible those things are at reporting time, the better.
Yep, absolutely. So I think the really important point that I want to make in terms of your monitoring and your reporting is it can actually be incredibly valuable. It's not just, you know, this pesky thing that you have to do to keep your funders happy. It's actually a really important thing that you can share more widely. And I will go into that a little bit further on. All right, mapping. Now, I was talking about monitoring being commensurate with your activities, and I'm just going to share an excellent example of monitoring. All right.
Oh.
Okay, so this is a feral pig project that we've funded over multiple years, and you can see here that they've put a lot of effort into actually determining where the pigs are have been found, and you know, they've got some descriptors as well in there. They've got some stats. All of this is very, very fancy, and a couple of graphs, but it tells a really great story. It actually tells us where these pigs have been found, what's actually happened, what the stats look like over years. So it's a really important tool to give to report on.
So Deb, I'm wondering if what I'm hearing you say there is that in the reporting, you know, sometimes we can get really caught in our templates and, you know, putting those few words that we're able to put into the portal, because all of the reporting goes into there. Is it worth, when people are, you know, telling their story, which is potentially useful for other purposes as well, to talk about their organisation in their annual reports or to promote themselves to other funding bodies, can they attach other things into the portal to support that if there's not actually room in the limited character spaces, please?
Absolutely. I think, you know, it's I don't mean to sound so droll, but the adage, you know, a picture tells 1,000 words. And if you can find other ways to report against, you know, your requirements that help to tell that story, absolutely. Yeah, and there is definitely room in your reporting around that. I think the other thing that I really want to emphasize is when you read a report, if you hear that, you know, if you hear it's written like someone is telling that story, it's just wonderful to read. It's absolutely brilliant. I really love reading a report where I hear the bad news stories as well, where it's really clear this hasn't worked and this is why it hasn't worked. it's absolutely okay to not achieve. But what we do want to hear is that you have learnt from that and what you will propose to do for that not to happen again, and also how you're going to share those learnings. The learnings are just as important as the successes. So I know sometimes people feel like that might not help them in future applications, and that's so not the case. It's really important that you tell us the story of what happened. Tell us the fact that you know there was a relationship fallout between partners. You know, those are really important aspects. So you know, please don't think of reporting as this really bland, dry thing. It should be juicy. It should actually be really interesting to read, and I would encourage you to write your reports like that. So
Deb, can I jump in and just ask, is that also reflected, say, if you're applying for a variation?
yes.
Is that again telling that story of what's actually happened? Because sometimes it's nerve-wracking to feel like you want to expose yourself to the funding body and say that partnership has collapsed, or that work with that Aboriginal organisation is unable to proceed, or, you know, we've lost 4 of our staff and we can't progress. Is that kind of transparency what you're looking for, really?
Absolutely. Yep. And it's really interesting because often what happens, sorry, I know we're going off slightly on a tangent here, but often what happens with variations is we get a variation, we look at it and we go, okay, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't really tell us why. And we get on the phone and then we find out the real reason underneath that. But it's okay. It's really, truly okay. We work in a really complex space. We work with environment, which is, is so flexible and has so many variabilities. We work with people, which is even worse. And when you put the two of those together, it's going to change. Your projects do change. It's the nature of the industry that we work in. So to reflect that, we actually want to be honest and appropriate. And, I can't think of there being too many examples where we would go, okay, that's actually a massive problem and we probably need to pull the funding. If we ever get to that point, I'm almost certain that the people running the project will be the first ones to say, we can't do this anymore. So, I guess what I'm saying is please don't be fearful of us, because, we've worked and played in this space for a long time and there's not too much that would surprise us. All right, moving on. Just trying to find how I move this slide on. Apologies, guys. I don't use Zoom very often for this. We mostly use Teams, so I am trying to figure out how to move this slide on.
Are you wanting to? There we go.
Thank you, found it. Okay, so can everyone see that map now? Just making sure we're all looking at the same thing. Great. So this is actually an example of a map that was done. You can see here they've actually identified all the little bits and pieces, but they've also actually put in important little components that help describe the site itself. These guys were actually looking at Ricali and how they were actually proposing to monitor and why they needed to access certain points. And it just really made sense. You can see there, okay, that makes sense. They can only actually access it by kayak at certain times of the year. Again, another map that actually helps to really understand the site itself.
And Deb, if your group doesn't necessarily hold, because we know that a lot of our member groups don't always hold the skills or resources, without coordinators available in the quantity that they used to be, are people able to do something a bit less sophisticated as well? Could they do a screenshot and draw on it and photograph it and make
Absolutely.
it work?
Yep, it does. I mean, I'm just sharing now another site that you can see. You know, you can actually see where they were doing the land mapping, the weeding. So this is that you can see where their priority area is. You can see all of these other components as well that actually show you that there is another map for this as well that shows previous efforts. And so you can actually start building a picture and seeing what efforts are being made across multiple years. And it starts to become a very rich picture. I'm getting quite good at flicking through these screens. Okay, photo point monitoring.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Not everybody likes photo point monitoring.
Hang on, can you see that?
Not yet. It's coming. There it is.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Jax. Okay, so photo point monitoring. It does not have to be scary. And I'm going to spend a fair bit of time on photo point monitoring. And the main reason being is that it's probably one of the simplest things you can do. So this is one of the first parts of a really good example. You can see down here, they've actually got sites of where they took the photo point monitoring. Now, this here on this side is an acceptable photo point monitoring. You can actually see, I don't know whether you guys can see, there's a tree there.
Yeah.
There's a tree there. So you can actually see that they are taken at the same spot. However, on the other side, this is not a great example. And I'm going to flick through a number of different examples here. But the other thing I want to show you is that we do actually have a fact sheet, which I will also share with you. It is also linked in the guidelines. And so it shows the very basics of actually how you do it. There's a number of apps that you can use. And that's an example there. And it just basically takes you through the basics of how to do photo point monitoring. It's not actually difficult. It just requires, again, a little bit of planning and a little bit of follow-up.
Yeah, but I think the thing that I experienced with it in receiving reports in another job is it sort of says in the title, doesn't it? But it's not explained. Is photo point monitoring is you're photographing again and again for the purposes of monitoring from the same photo point.
Yes.
So I think what you said at the beginning is that you have the landmarks. You've got that tree line in the horizon and the tree in the sort of middle rear ground. That's got to appear in each of your photos, regardless of how many trees you might have planted on the right somewhere. You've got to show the change in the landscape.
Yep.
You know, be that for good or bad, if you've had success or failure.
Yep. And yeah, that's an excellent point, Jax. And this is, I'm just about to show you a number of examples. So this is year one. And then this is showing year two, where you can actually start to see the landscape has changed, but it's really clear, crystal clear, that it's exactly the same site. Again, very clear that it's the same site. And again, very clear it's the same site. And this is probably one of my favourite examples. This was done down in Albany, and they built a drain and then re-vegged it out. And you can see that's over about 3 years, I think. These are annual photos. But it's really powerful. It's incredibly powerful way of reporting back, but also the second, and this is the, I'm going to flick down to this bit. This is the other bit that can really help you, because this is we've basically reposted this from Moore Catchment Council, and so they posted that, and it's helping their communications, it's helping their promotions, and it's just a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
So this is talking about evidencing events as well. You know, you can take a photo of the event. You can actually repost or send a screenshot of a post that you did via social media. You can also send in your participation sheets. But just doing in your reporting, just saying a number is probably not going to cut it. So it is critically important that you do collect these things along the way. So that's it as much as I've got here. The one thing I do want to really emphasize is making sure that you are you're setting up your monitoring so that it addresses the outcome. So what I might do is I'm going to flick back to this example that I'd really like people to participate in if they don't mind. I'm curious to know how people would, given that example, what would people see as being which are the outcomes, and how would you actually monitor those things? Putting people on the spot. Go for it. And it's a resounding quietness. I'm going to put Joe on the spot because none of you are talking to me. So
I found my unmute bottom at the bottom left of my screen. So this is revegetation and fencing. So immediately my brain says, okay, we've got a few different things happening there. Remnant vegetation is planting, that is photo point monitoring. And so, you know, setting up, even, you know, whacking a stake in the ground to say, okay, this is the point that I'm going to stand here and I'm going to face that tree. And we're going to take a picture before we've started planting. We're going to take a picture after we're planting. We're going to take a picture 6 months down the track to see how they're growing. And that's the planning. The fencing is kind of photo point monitoring to a certain extent, but not so much. It's more a proof of the fact that you've done it. So you take a picture of where the fencing is going to go. There's an empty space. You take a picture of the bloke putting in the fencing. There it is going in. And then you take a picture which shows not just one little tiny piece of fencing, it shows you the length of the fencing. So we can get an idea that if you put in 1 kilometre of fencing, you can see 1 kilometre of fencing heading down into the distance. And if you've got fencing which is, you know, going around corners, a few different photos of different sections to say, yep, we've done all of the fencing we said we were going to do, and here it is. And ideally, if that's going to be protecting your remnant vegetation, what you're seeing behind that fencing is some of the little, you know, revegetation plants that you've put in. So that's those two. And then there's volunteers. So volunteers from the local community, that's an event. And what you want is lots of volunteers going, yay, here we are planting, or ideally what I like to call the bum shot, which is where all of the volunteers are bums up in the air, putting stuff in the ground. And, you know, you can see, oh, look, there's at least 5 volunteers and there's probably a few more in the distance, and they're there. It's an event. They've all done it. it doesn't even have to be, you know, take a picture of the re-veg after it's gone in, take a picture of the volunteers having morning tea. You know, it shouldn't be hard. But and so the outcomes, like Deb said earlier, you've got the biodiversity conservation and protection. So that's the fencing, that's the re-veg. And then you've got engaging your volunteers and engaging and capacity building, which is the other priority, and the outcomes. And so when you think about those, it's like, okay, the priority is biodiversity. So I want the picture of the plants because that's the biodiversity. And the other one is about engagement and people. So I want the pictures of people to show that they were there. And that's the outcome that you're ending up with. Is that good?
That's awesome. Thank you. And I'm just actually trying to, I've just realized that, that there's a really fabulous example that I've been just trying to find and I can't. But it's around the dog-proof fence. And you can see there's a couple of photos, and it is taken from up high with a drone. And you can actually see one side before the fence went through, that's what it looks like. And then afterwards, you can actually see the differences in vegetation on both sides. So again, you know, that's a more sophisticated example, but an excellent example of how, you know, the thing that you did is influencing that environment.
Absolutely. So that's the longer term monitoring where you're showing that change in the landscape over time. And that's important for your more complex projects. So you want to be going back and taking pictures over time to show things happening and changing. But equally, if you're it's a little project, you've got a few farm properties, it's all happening over a year and a half. And you've taken a bunch of photos through the project, and you've written a little newsletter, which has got all of the photos in it. You know, it's got some evidence of the people and it's got a bit of the story. You don't have to give us all the photos if everything is already in that newsletter. So if you've got an annual report or you've got a quarterly newsletter and you've tracked a whole lot of information about that project into your newsletter, give us the newsletter and we can go, yep, look, we can see all of that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, these are all really important aspects, you know, and it's about capturing those things as you're going along, because, you know, our job isn't to make life more difficult for you. Our job is to make it easy for you so that you can get on and do the really important work that you do. That said, we also have our own reporting requirements, and, you know, it is taxpayers' money. So we do need to make sure that, you know, our governance is solid as well. And I hope you guys do understand that. So does anyone else want to contribute to this little example or have any questions around if you're looking at this and going, actually, that's really hard and I don't understand?
Something I've found, Deb, just through project managing a large grant through another employer, is being really clear at the start of the project and identifying and mapping your key deliverables. So, and then having an evidence folder that is attached to each of those deliverables. So when that thing happens, it goes into the evidence folder. So when you are coming to your reporting time, that they're really easy and quick to pull from your deliverables, and that they match really well with your deliverables in that way. Sometimes when you're coordinating the events, like the tree planting event or the re-veg day, that you can get caught up in the doing and you forget about what needs to happen on that day. So identifying a volunteer or another staff member that could help you on that day, and if you provide them with, I need a photo of XYZ, can I leave that with you today to manage for me? And getting people around you to help you out and support you, because the reporting it's very important, but it's a big thing to do for a small organisation at times. So I think pulling in people to help you, to support you, is a good idea.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things is, if you are doing a project and it's been, you know, you've had multiple lots of funding, and it's a project that's going to go on and potentially continue going on. And you and your group are interested in doing something a little bit more solid in terms of your monitoring and your evaluation. Consider actually asking for funds to do that. So if you want to do something a little bit more fancy with GIS, with spatial information, if you want to use drones, if you want to do, if you want to get a consultant in to actually look at an aspect of your work, ask for those funds. It might be that you will need to evidence why you need that. But, there's nothing wrong with actually requesting those funds. And that's actually held in fairly good weight as well, because we can see that you actually want to evidence why this funding should continue. Really important aspect. That all said, we are getting a lot of requests for drones, and some of those requests aren't really justified. Because it's quite on trend at the moment, and it's something a little different, and I agree, it can do amazing things, but you need to, again, it needs to be commensurate. So if you are doing small pieces of work over an extended period, and you have and there are only small amounts, then it would be hard to justify a drone, because it's not just a drone, it's the training and the staff to do that. So please be aware that while we recognise the importance of drones, they need to be commensurate with the actual project.
Yeah.
So
we had Jo with her hand up, being very patient there, Jo.
And waiting until Deb finished to say, actually, that's pretty much what I was going to say too. So, it's about being commensurate, and we've had some very interesting different kinds of monitoring for evidence and reporting. It's important to remember that it's not, monitoring and reporting is not usually just for that project. We expect it in terms of evidencing the funding, but you've got to remember that this is also a really good tool and resource in order for you to prove that you need funding later. So if you've done one project and you've only got so far, and then you're going to need more funding, this is where that having those folders where you're saving that information, having that evidence, is going to build your ability to actually get more funding in the future to continue doing all that fabulous work that you're doing. And with the different kinds of evidence, if you've got a bigger project and it's got some capacity building as well as the on-ground works, have a think about things like videos. We've got groups that are doing video recording of traditional owner information and stories. They've also got where they're out on, there's a grader school, and they've taken a videographer with them to actually video the graders out at work doing the rehydration earthworks. And these things are amazing, and there's a lot of really, really good stuff happening on Facebook, and you can see some of the really good resources that are out there. And if you need some extra money to do that, please ask for it. If you've got a good project and there's something that you really want to share because it's new and it's exciting, have a think about not just how you're going to evidence it to us, but how you're going to share it with everyone else as well.
Great, thank you, Jo. Can we pop across to the chat? Deb, as a non-Zoomer, I can read these out for you, or you can just click on the chat, but we have comments and questions, and I'll go to, there's some lovely shares of resources in there. You will get copies of these, everyone. These will get sent out to you afterwards so that you can follow up on things like the My Maps app and some other bits and pieces. A photo monitoring app that's available. We'll share content about those. Kathy Dawson has asked, reporting demonstrating value for money, how to quantify in-kind contributions accurately. That's a great question, because a lot of us struggle with that.
Yep, excellent question, Kath. One of the things that we encourage everyone to use is and some of you may be across this, but the West Australian Volunteers Calculator is an incredible resource. Give me 5 seconds. I'll see if I can get it up. But so you just basically just Google West Australian Volunteers.
Don't worry, Deb, we'll share that
I'll
as a
do that,
link
Deb,
in the
that's
chat
okay.
as well.
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys. So yeah, if we can get that up, you can actually see that but you can punch in how many roughly. So as an example, if you've got a group of X amount of volunteers and they do X amount of hours on average, punch all that in and it will actually give you a value. Now, the reason we love this calculator is, one, because it standardizes effort. But the second thing is it takes into account travel, phone calls, meals, all of those things that actually are critically important to the efforts that you put in. One of the things we find fairly consistently is whatever volunteer effort and co-contribution that you guys put in your applications, when it comes time to reporting, it is nearly always at least double, because you're a little bit hesitant, I imagine, at application to basically go, well, this is what we think. And then when you actually look at the effort, it's way more than you think. So we would really encourage you guys to use this. In essence, it's designed to capture, if government were to pay for the effort that you are putting in as a volunteer, what would that cost?
This is a great resource, Deb. Can you see it on the screen?
Yeah, I can. Yep.
Yeah, and what I hadn't tapped into previously, is this a pivot table that's attached to that amount, or is that a separate table?
No, it's attached. So it will spit out a value at the end.
And what a great resource.
Yeah, all of those things, when you look at those, you know, these are all things that you may not consider when you're actually looking at, you know, okay, so some volunteers come out and they might spend 3 or 4 hours out on site, but it's way more than that. It's a lot more than that, because they have to drive themselves, they pay for food, there's also phone calls to organize all of that.
So,
yes, Jax is just doing an example up there.
Yes, and it's a question that's been coming up a lot, is people saying, look, we're volunteering our time, but the cost of fuel, you know, it has gone up so much. You know, how can we afford to continue volunteering, or, you know, can we assist people in additional ways to do so? So annual volunteer expenses, if they come out weekly and it's a bit of travel, transport and accommodation, a couple of people at different age groups, annual volunteer expenses, $14,560. Job done. That is gold, Deb. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's around volunteering. So in terms of, I'm just checking Kath's question. Did that answer your question fully? I'm just trying to find it. Sorry, bear with me.
It's about, yeah, how do you calculate those in-kind contributions accurately?
Yeah. So hopefully that's answered your question, Kathy.
If I can just jump in very quickly and suggest that a number of the organisations actually use volunteer registration sort of sheets, so you can keep track of who's turned up, how many hours they spent there, and that'll certainly help when you're doing your calculations and things like that. And make sure that if you've got partners and that they're recording their in-kind hours as well, just give them a little prompt to keep a track of the sort of hours that they're spending working on your project.
The other question Kathy's included, which is the follow-up, which is the big one for all of us, can you include event participation as volunteers, so that your people who are going to your events, they're volunteers as well, volunteering their time?
Yep, absolutely.
I see, Deb, I disagree, and we're going to have a chat about this. If your volunteers are there and they're supporting because they're helping you out to do stuff, then they are volunteers and they're working. If they are there just to receive information, then they are participants and they're not volunteering their time because they're getting something out of it.
Okay, Joe and I will talk about this a little later. We have these sorts of conversations in our office all the time, simply because the space we're playing in is really complicated. It's there's bits and pieces, and we laugh all the time because we update our guidelines every single year, and it's usually because you guys find the holes in them. So we have to go, okay, that's it. So we have to go and find the holes and figure out a policy standpoint in that. So Kath, the short answer is, would it be okay for us to get back to you with absolute clarity around that one? Thank you.
Terrific. That will come out with our communications as well. While we've got everyone there, can we just ask people to put their videos on, just so we can see your lovely smiling faces and get a quick screenshot for our State NRM reporting. Oh, look, there's people there. Hello. Wonderful. Get a few more faces on. Case will do a shot. We can do a big wave.
And while you're there, Case, can you explain to people how to do a screenshot like this?
Yeah, happily.
Good point.
Just at the top, if you're using a laptop or a PC, there's a print screen button at the top right, and you can just click that and it goes into your saved photos, and you can pull it out from there.
Oh, that's very, very simple. So that's generally about 3 along to the left from your top right-hand corner, print screen.
And if you're looking for it on a laptop, it's on my F10, and it says PRT SC. That's your print screen.
I think Claire just gave it a try and she came up sideways. Give us a wave, everybody, and we'll grab a quick photo. Those of you who've got enough bandwidth. A lot of people in the Southwest don't have much bandwidth at the moment. There's lots of building and stuff going on. Stephanie, you've got a question. Lovely, thank you. No, Kathy's hand up. Sorry, the screen was moving around then. There was some hands up and then down. Fantastic.
I think if you put your hand up, it just registers it as a hand up.
Oh, that's the new version of Zoom, is it? Some of them I've been on, they're giving them numbers now, which is great. So, you have a lot of people in the room and their hands go up and they get number 1, 2, 3, 4, and it comes up in the chat. So it's getting easier to not miss people out. Okay, any further questions from anyone? Comments, requests, Deb?
I've actually just noted that Vanessa McGuinness has basically said if anyone wants any more information on the PhotoMon app, she's happy to talk to everyone. That was Vanessa, I don't know whether you're there still, but I believe that was a Commonwealth funded through either Caring for Country or so I would encourage you to use any of those apps as well, because they are very, very useful.
Excellent.
And I think it was either you, Jax, or Casey's actually said My Maps available through the Google Suite is user-friendly. We actually have people use that really successfully. It's actually quite fun. Just be aware that it can swallow up many hours because it is a lot of fun. But yeah, you don't need to go all high tech in terms of your spatial GIS information. There are simple options available as well that are really useful.
I think what's really encouraging that I've heard, Deb, and it's particularly important for those small groups again, is that you guys aren't asking to replicate reporting for reporting's sake. And we'll make a note of that in our email that goes out to all the people who registered, is that there are other ways that evidence can be supported and collated. Your annual report, newsletters, the things that you put out, the flyers that you put out to promote your gigs, all of those things constitute evidence and support. So as you go along, I think one of the issues that happens, and it certainly has happened in this organisation, I didn't say that out loud, is that your reporting sneaks up on you. And if you haven't had a system throughout the period of your project to be collecting that evidence as you go, then you're in trouble, because you've got to go on a big hunt back through Facebook and back through everything. And then sometimes even you have people nodding and saying, oh my goodness, we didn't get, you know, the appropriate photos at the right time of that photo point. And now we're, you know, we've missed the opportunity. So there's a bit in there about scheduling and organising, just those reminders to do a little bit towards your reporting each quarter, or in whatever system works for you.
Yeah, so it's about, yeah, the planning to monitor is really important. And I can't emphasize that enough. It's a little bit of work up front, but you'll be so grateful at the end. You will have gone, oh, there's all my evidence, and just dump it in the report. You know, write some great words about telling the story of your project, and your report's pretty much done. I'll flick your finances off to your auditor
if needs be.
yep. Actually, I've just thought of something that I haven't actually brought up before. One of the things that you'll note about our program as well is that we don't ask you for those financials. We don't ask you for receipts and that sort of evidence. Yes, we ask you to go and get a financial audit. But one of the ways that we, instead of doing that, because, you know, we don't have the internal capacity as well to actually, you know, do the financial verification of, you know, 300 or 400 projects, we don't. So that's why we ask you to get an auditor or a oh, words today, this is terrible, or get a bookkeeper to actually look after that for you if it's a smaller project. But the other part of that is the evidence to prove that that money has been appropriately spent. So, you know, rather than asking you guys for those really in-depth financials as part of our reporting, we ask you for the actual reporting on against your monitoring plan.
Excellent. There's a comment here about that template for the final report, which often isn't available necessarily right from the outset of a project. Could that be available? Oh, Jo, you wanted to respond?
Yes, that's on my list of things to do. So now that we've sort of back on track, and it won't be available for every year because we've changed a bit, but now that we're sort of settling into it, a better system on Smarty Grants, I'm going to do the same thing for the reporting that I've done for the application, and that's to put it in a Word document so you can take that away and have it somewhere so you can read through it from time to time and keep that with your computers so you can whack all of your information in there as you go along.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jo.
All right. Any final questions or comments for people? We've got plenty of time, but as we have, you know, gone through a lot of material there from Deb, and as we say, it's recorded, so people have got the ability to go back and review at their own leisure, which they often like to. We've had a lot of contact the last 24 hours, probably more than we've ever had, about a Landcare Build Skills, saying, please, 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 are you recording this? Because I can't come tomorrow, but I do want to be able to watch it. And people will watch it again as they get closer to reporting time, of course.
And for those who are listening, will be listening to this as a recording, I need to apologize up front. I'm actually not particularly well at the moment and my brain is not working. And this hasn't been my finest effort, but I do appreciate your patience with that. If I've missed anything, if anything's not clear, please either contact Jax, or, you know, we're really happy for you guys to talk to us as well, and we can walk you through anything.
Not a problem, Deb. I think you've done a great job yourself and Jo. We really appreciate it. There's lots of positive comments in the chat there. I would just like to thank everyone for joining us, and to say that our next Landcare Checks-In opportunity for us all to be together again is on Tuesday, the 22nd of August, and is called understanding urban forest initiatives. And we'll be hearing about rewilding of Perth and learning a lot about those fantastic things that you see on Gardening Australia and all those other national shows, talking about how we're really recognising the power and potential of forests to make for better amenity, quality of life, and better habitat in our urban areas. I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Joe. Bye, Deb. We're all busy. We'll all get on with it and get reporting.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Can you stay on, please, Case?